Taking sides. Will tighter restrictions on gun sales make us safer or violate our right to bear arms? New cardinals? We look into rumors that Pope Francis will soon appoint another batch of red hats. Moving up, some North American Eastern Rite Catholics now belong to what amounts to a giant diocese. And risky sport. We explore the Catholic approach to the risk for concussion on the football field. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, January 5th, 2016. The President and Congress do battle over public safety versus Second Amendment rights. The gun control debate tops our news tonight. Good evening with the EWTN News Nightly team. I'm Brian Patrick. Our team coverage includes Jason Calvi with reaction from Capitol Hill in just a moment. But first we go to Chief White House Correspondent and Political Director Lauren Ashburn.
It was an emotional day at the White House as the president cried, remembering mass shootings that have taken place in America. In the East Room, he unveiled his executive action plan to stop those killings.
Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad.
In an emotional speech to survivors like former Arizona Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, the president outlined his plan to bypass Congress and close what is called the gun show loophole.
Anybody in the business of selling firearms must get a license and conduct background checks or be subject to criminal prosecutions. We're going to do everything we can to ensure the smart and effective enforcement of gun safety laws that are already on the books.
Other key priorities include $500 million more to treat mental illness and a requirement that firearms lost in transit between a manufacturer and seller be reported to federal authorities. The supportive crowd included Mark and Jackie Berman, whose 7-year-old son, Daniel, was killed in the Newtown massacre.
We were practicing Catholics right up until that day. And I guess the best way to describe that is that we are hopefully on our journey back.
But while he says his anger and despair at times are overwhelming,
I have to temper that with the realization of how wonderfully blessed I am.
While the president and his team believe that these actions are constitutionally sound, his critics, both on the campaign trail and Capitol Hill, believe they are not. Jason Calvi is on Capitol Hill with more. Jason?
Lauren, Speaker Ryan says the president is undermining liberty. He says the president's actions cannot trump the Second Amendment right to bear arms. The announcement is igniting debate on the campaign trail.
I am very proud of President Obama's announcement today.
While Republicans say the president is overstepping his authority.
If there's an issue related to federal gun laws, then you ought to go to Congress and try to forge consensus to make it happen. He doesn't have this power.
Congress rejected White House-backed gun control measures in 2013. But a recent AP poll finds 58% of Americans favor stricter gun laws.
I oppose gun violence, and I don't think anything the president's talking about doing or is doing will prevent it. Because gun violence is committed by criminals, and criminals don't care what the law is. They violate it, that's why they're criminals. So he's obsessed with undermining the Second Amendment.
Republican candidates say they'll repeal the president's executive action. But Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton is using that threat to rally her supporters.
The next president, on the very first day, could wipe it away. No, I won't wipe it away.
And already powerful Republicans are threatening to strip funding for Obama's plan. The chairman of the House committee that oversees funding for the Justice Committee says he'll take away funding for that group if they put into action the president's plan. Speaker of the House Paul Ryan says that the president's order will be challenged in court. Brian?
Thanks, Jason Calvi at the Capitol and Lauren Ashburn at the White House. A quick recap now. President Obama unveils new details today about his gun control plan. He wants anyone in the business of selling firearms to register as a gun dealer. That means more buyers would be subject to background checks. Many Republican lawmakers and presidential candidates oppose the plan. They accuse the president of circumventing Congress, and they don't believe his plan will improve public safety. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. U.S. Special Operations Forces come under attack in Afghanistan. The military says at least one American was killed and 2 others wounded in fighting today. This renewed fighting reflects intensified efforts to push back against recent Taliban gains. Protesters in Oregon refusing to leave a federal building until their demands are met. The group calling itself Citizens for Constitutional Reform is in a standoff with the federal government over land rights. It includes members of the Bundy family, known for a standoff with federal officers in Nevada. Peace talks in Syria move forward despite new tensions among some Arab nations. Saudi Arabia severed diplomatic ties with Iran after protesters ransacked the Saudi embassy in Tehran. They were outraged that Saudi Arabia executed a Shiite cleric and dozens of others. Other countries have also cut off ties with Iran. The U.S. State Department is staying out of the fray while encouraging dialogue between the two sides. For the first time in nearly 17 years, opponents of the socialist revolution begun by the late Hugo Chavez now control the legislature in Venezuela. The new lawmakers were sworn in today in Caracas. They vow change in the midst of a looming power struggle with socialist President Nicolás Maduro. At the top of their agenda is freedom for jailed activists considered political prisoners by many human rights groups. The U.S. accuses Maduro of interfering with the new Congress. A Franciscan priest abducted by militants in Syria is now free. The Vatican's envoy in Aleppo says Iraqi-born Father Diha Aziz had been treated well in captivity, but he's exhausted and he needs rest. This is the second time Father Aziz had been abducted. He managed to escape in July after only a few days of captivity. Well, the Vatican has yet to confirm rumors in Rome that Pope Francis could be close to naming some new cardinals. Alan Holdren is with us from Rome. Alan, what are you hearing there about the possibility of a consistory of cardinals next month?
Well, Brian, people are saying in the Italian media here that there could be this consistory coming up, in part because the last 2 years at this time of the year, Pope Francis has held a consistory. So it's due to this tradition that he has at this point, and it's also due to the fact that there is a future lack in the number of cardinals to fill the Cardinals College and vote for the successor of Pope Francis.
So how many cardinals are in the college right now, and how many are eligible to vote for the next pope in the conclave?
Well, right now, Brian, there are 216 cardinals. That includes those over 80 years of age and those under 80 years of age who are eligible to vote in a conclave. There are 117 voters right now that's set to fall in the next year.
So as the cardinals turn 80 in this coming year, how many of them will actually be disqualified from voting?
There'll be 10 of them, Brian, and among them are 2 Americans. There's Cardinal Roger Mahony from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, the emeritus there, and there's also the emeritus of San Francisco, who worked here in the Vatican, Cardinal William Laveda, both turning 80 the next year.
So can we expect the Pope, if he names new cardinals, to bypass some of the archdioceses that have traditionally had cardinals as their shepherds?
Well, that's what he's done here historically, Brian. In the last 2 years, he's gone to what he calls the peripheries. He's gone to places like Burkina Faso in Africa, which most people have never heard of. He's gone to places like Haiti, to Tonga in the Pacific, and bypassing places like Venice and Turin here in Italy, who are traditionally entitled to these cardinalate nominations. That also includes places in the United States. So we're looking to see if he's going to tap anyone in the United States this year, if there's indeed a consistory. And there are some cardinal possibilities there in the United States.
It has not yet been confirmed by the Vatican, but everybody's talking about it in Rome. Thanks for sharing that news with us, Alan Holdren.
Thank you, Ryan.
And the Little Sisters of the Poor again urge the U.S. Supreme Court to protect them from $70 million in government fines. This is the second time the sisters, who care for the elderly poor, have been forced to seek protection from the Supreme Court. They claim the government is trying to make them violate their Catholic faith by providing contraceptives to their employees. The Supreme Court gave the sisters preliminary protection 2 years ago and will hear their case this March. Hundreds of homeowners in the Midwest face a massive cleanup. Record-setting river levels flooded so many homes. The water is finally starting to recede and some roads are reopening. Up to 14 inches of rain fell in parts of Missouri and Illinois last week, leading to at least 25 deaths. John Foppe, Executive Director of the St. Vincent de Paul Society for the Archdiocese of St. Louis, is joining us. John, can you give us an idea of what it's like on the ground in your area now?
Well, the rivers have crested and the waters are receding. However, many people are still displaced from their homes. Red Cross has many shelters open throughout the area, and people are slowly getting back just to starting to assess the damage in their respective homes.
Have you ever seen flooding on this scale at this time of year?
No, not at this time of the year. Of course, the Midwest is no stranger to flooding. We're veterans of the big flood of '93, but not this time of year, no.
So Vincentians are, in a sense, second responders. Explain that, if you would.
Certainly. That means that we follow the lead of first responders like the American Red Cross or FEMA. They go in and really help provide the initial rescue. We are there for the long term. We are there to provide clothing or furniture or food or those sorts of things. Again, Red Cross does the rescue and then we do the recovery efforts. We could be there for up to a year afterwards.
Give us an example of, say, helping a person with a situation that might be rather, something that you guys would do rather than the Red Cross.
Certainly. So, again, we can provide, we operate 6 thrift stores in the St. Louis area, so we can provide clothing, we can provide household goods, furniture. We have a strong mattress program. We can get people mattresses that have been affected by the flooding. So it's a lot of those basic needs. That's what SVDP, our hallmark, has been for 170 years in St. Louis, to help people get back on their feet again.
Well, so many of us are used to contributing to our local conference of St. Vincent de Paul. How might we help the people there in the St. Louis area?
Well, first of all, you can help by praying. These people have been devastated. As you can imagine, their lives are just turned upside down, and there's just all kinds of emotional turmoil that comes with that. And what we pride ourselves on is to be the face of Christ for people in need. So we could always use the prayers, and so could the people, the victims. And then secondly, if someone would choose to help us financially, they can make a gift going onto our website, which is svdpstl.org. It's svdpstl.org. Or reach out to a parish church here in the local area and contact the local St. Vincent de Paul at a particular parish and ask what they need. They may need volunteer efforts, or it just varies from community to community.
Well, we appreciate what the Vincentians are doing, and thank you for your time. John Foppe, thank you.
Thank you.
Mixed results today on Wall Street. The stock market closing virtually flat, with the Dow up slightly, the NASDAQ down very slightly. This in contrast to yesterday's dramatic drop sparked by a plunge in China's stock prices. Coming up, Pope Francis slips away to a special place for personal prayer. And Catholics with roots in India now have a new, unique North American identity. Today, January 5th, we celebrate the Memorial St. John Newman, a native of Bohemia and Philadelphia's 4th bishop. He's known for founding the Catholic school system in the United States. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Well, Pope Francis quietly visits a place where his namesake, St. Francis of Assisi, created the first nativity scene. The Holy Father traveled to Greccio in the Lazio region, north of Rome, Monday, praying before a 15th century fresco. The Italian Catholic media reports the Pope went there strictly for personal prayer. The sanctuary of Greccio marks the site where the Christmas nativity scene was first recreated by St. Francis in 1223. And Pope Francis makes a move highlighting the universality of the Catholic Church. He approves a new church structure in Canada and the U.S. to serve Catholics with their roots in India. Wyatt Goolsby reports.
It's a liturgy most Americans have never seen before. It's the Syro-Malankara Catholic Church, based in India. They are in full communion with Rome, but keep many of their Eastern Rite traditions. Pope Francis has created a new eparchy for the group in the U.S. and Canada. It's just like a diocese, with a bishop and other clergy serving about 11,000 members. Archbishop Cyril Vasil works in the Vatican's Congregation for Oriental Churches.
The Church should follow the faithful, simply. So if we have numerous structure of some and presence of some faithful of some church, we should also provide for the pastoral care of this church through the normal structure.
The church has been well established in the U.S. for decades. Father Mathai leads St. Mary's in Maryland.
It's very vibrant because we have only 30 families that are coming from 65 miles.
Father Mathai says the rite traces its origins all the way back to ancient times.
Jesus sent apostles to all around the world, and St. Thomas came to India. And he, because of the grace of the Holy Spirit started a community there. Prior to that, only Hinduism was there.
Leaving a rich Christian tradition that continues to be celebrated today. The Syro-Malankara Church was not in union with Rome for several centuries because of disputes, but the church came back into union with the Pope in 1930. The Eparchy of St. Mary, Queen of Peace, is the only one outside of India. Brian?
Fascinating, very visual. Thank you, Wyatt. A notoriously anti-Semitic book is suddenly back in the news. 70 years after it was banned in Germany, Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, has been suppressed since the Nazi defeat in World War II. With its copyright now expired, that infamous book is easier than ever to get. Stephen Luckert is curator of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Couldn't those who wanted to read this book access it online anyway?
Yeah, Brian, Mein Kampf has been available online for a number of years. So with the click of a mouse or a few keystrokes, you can download that, and in a variety of different languages. So in today's environment, it seems it's very difficult to ban or prohibit any type of text because it's so readily available.
Well, it's been 70 years, but there's a word that there's a rising anti-Semitism, especially in Europe. Could this release again fuel that?
Well, I think that's the real fear, that among Holocaust survivors and some Jewish organizations, recognizing that today, when anti-Semitism and racism are on the rise, that could Mein Kampf fuel that? Now, the challenge, of course, for the German government, and they've made this clear, is that if it is published and used to incite hatred, they will prosecute those individuals. So they're looking at that also and making sure that it doesn't happen.
Do you think anything positive can come from this re-release, if you will?
Actually, in some ways, I think German educators, German scholars are arguing, and I think quite rightly, that it can be used to counter extremism, that it can be used to counter anti-Semitism and hatred by exposing these ideas in an educational environment, in an open discussion, that it can be used to fight those very ideas that Hitler sought to promote.
How might we confront propaganda like this in our world today?
Well, I think it differs on situations, so that in places where, in post-genocidal societies, for instance, often restriction or prohibition of certain types of messaging, like in Rwanda, for instance, has been used to curtail violence. But I think the best antidote is often the kind of marketplace of ideas, the notion that good ideas will triumph over evil.
I wonder what you think about the 50 years since Nostra Aetate and the improving relations between Catholics and Jews, the two cultures really better understanding each other. Does that help?
Actually, I think it does. I think since 1965, when Pope Paul VI issued this declaration, I think the relationship, the discussion, the dialogue that's taken place between Jewish and Catholic groups has been quite good. And I expect and I hope that in the next 50 years it's going to get even better.
Well, Stephen Luckert, we appreciate you and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum right here in Washington. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you.
Up next, an Albuquerque toddler is found safe and sound after a horrific ordeal. And football is part of our culture, but at what risk to players taking big hits? Tonight, we virtually visit St. Peter's Basilica during this Year of Mercy. This beautiful shot is from the Vatican's Instagram account. Gorgeous and inspiring. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Brian Patrick. A 3-year-old carjacking victim is found alive in a parking lot. It was caught on camera, and we want to show you that joyful moment.
Hi, sweetheart. You okay? Come here. Come here. Come here.
Albuquerque police describe it as a happy ending. They say it won't be complete, though, until they find the suspect who stole a car with a 3-year-old inside. The car was taken from outside a supermarket Saturday night as the little girl's mother filled water bottles just feet away. That set in motion a 4-hour frantic search involving police and volunteers. Officer Chris Posha finally spotted the toddler in a parking lot.
I just looked over, I was watching them, and she was sitting right here. She was sitting right there on the curb.
I was using my spotlight, and I saw a ball of purple in the middle of a parking lot, and thought that weird.
The girl was found around 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, cold and not moving.
I'll be honest, on my way home, I started crying too. I was just very happy and thankful that we were able to find her.
Now, police are tracking a suspect they say likely faces theft, kidnapping, and even child abuse charges. They tell us the little girl, Caroline, was scared but not hurt. Thank God. Republican presidential candidate Dr. Ben Carson makes clear his stand on critical issues. Joining in EWTN's Candidate Conversations, Carson says many welfare programs reward broken family relationships. He also thinks faith should be encouraged.
The First Amendment is extremely important, freedom of religion, not freedom from religion, which again the secular progressives would have you believe that that was the case.
Carson says the president should emphasize the importance of faith through action. Watch the full interview with Dr. Ben Carson on Candidate Conversations Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN. We are just days away from the college football championship game and the start of the NFL playoffs. With growing concerns about concussions, how should we as Catholics view the violence inherent to football? Catherine Szeltner reports.
Arkansas wide receiver Dominique Reed gets carted off the field Saturday after a blow to the head. It's an all too familiar scene, placing the threat of concussions under increasing scrutiny.
What we know in the field of mild traumatic brain injury.
Today, a leading concussion specialist calls for greater safety on youth fields, saying injuries can impact academics, social interaction, even stress management.
The brain drives all of those kinds of functions, and when it's impaired, it affects those functions. So we need to be sure that we minimize those effects.
Also stirring the national discussion on football safety is the film Concussion.
I found a disease that no one has ever seen.
Starring Will Smith as the doctor who first discovered a football-related brain trauma. One Christian ethics professor says even though he is a football fan, the sport is too violent to watch.
We need to reevaluate our relationship with violence again. We absolutely do. So I think we need to absolutely remove any sense that the head can be used to tackle, for instance. That needs to go away.
Sports Leader, a Catholic program for coaches, agrees safety should be enhanced, but we can't forget about the good that comes from sports.
There's just so many different avenues to use football and sports in general as a tool to evangelize. Knowing that, the overwhelming majority of our Catholic youth are playing sports.
One way Sports Leader evangelizes is through a rosary rally. Student athletes come together to go to adoration and pray the rosary. When it comes to the NFL, Christian ethics professor Charles Camosi suggests we reserve our Sunday for church. Brian?
Yeah, Mass first, then the game. Thank you, Catherine. Well, we would like your opinion. How should Catholics respond to concussion concerns? Go to the EWTN News Nightly Facebook page, take our poll, and we'll share the results with you tomorrow night. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We say goodnight with images even colder than the Arctic blast moving across America tonight. Check out the ice castles at the Harbin Ice and Snow Festival in China.